Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the new Kershaw launch Iridium. Now, the Iridium, isn't that a Chinese model, and aren't the launch knives all made in the USA? This is now a USA Iridium, which is cool. I really wish that they would do, they would just bring the Iridium to the US side of Kershaw, but this is a really good option, right? For people who like to EDC automatic knives, this is definitely one of the better ones on the market, for sure. This is available. I will link it down in the description. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's up to you. Thanks to Kai USA for sending this in, and thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this knife. It's the Iridium. I've reviewed it. It's the same length, right? I mean, I think they actually list this at like 7.9. I mean, it's essentially 8 inches. It's right there. Blade length, 3.5. Cutting edge, 3.35. So good full-size knife, but with a much more narrow profile in a good way. It makes this knife very, very easy to carry versus other full-size knives that are a lot bigger. Let's go ahead and do some size comparison so I can, kind of explain what I'm talking about here. Any custom skills you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others. So up against the 8010 and the 8020.5, obviously it's nowhere near as big as something like the 8010, but it's not necessarily that much shorter. It's still longer and in thinner in terms of height, not quite as tall, I guess, as something like the 8020.5. But let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case the Ritter Hogue. We're going to kind of do these first here today. It's closer to the height of the Hogue Deca. It's just stretched out a bit, and it's almost exactly the same overall length as the Ritter Hogue, with, I think, essentially the same amount of cutting edge. Perhaps, yeah, it's identical in terms of cutting edge. So that's where this becomes a very preferable cutting tool for a lot of people. And then we'll put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and Para 3 just because we always do. And then we'll talk about action. If I can get my middle finger to work with the reverse. It's a Spyderco. I have to reverse flick it, so I take extra time in the review to do that. How's the action on this knife? It's a launch knife. In my experience, the launch knives are anywhere from completely acceptable to, wow, pretty strong, right? For example, the Launch 16 feels a little more powerful than some of the other Launch Series knives. I would say this is somewhere in between, perhaps slightly on the like not quite as powerful side, but it doesn't really matter. All that matters is that it's got enough force to always kick itself into the open position. And as you can see here, if I hold down the button, this is all I require, right? If it can do that, I consider it good. You push the button and it deploys. It does it. Some people have mentioned after I did that power ranking automatic knife short, they don't like automatic knives that are so powerful that you really have to like dedicate mental energy to it lest it fly out of your hand. And I can understand that. So for people who are maybe a little jumpy, like I let my mom deploy a very underpowered automatic knife one time, and I'll never forget that. She was so terrified of it. It was fine. Everything worked out fine. Nobody got hurt. But it deployed, and even knowing what it was going to do, she jumped and dropped it, And that's okay. Some people who are knife people are kind of like that. And if that's the type of person you are, I think that this would be a much easier automatic knife to deal with. Or if you just don't care and you're like, I'm buying it for a tool, right? This will do exactly what it's designed to do. And as far as automatic knives go if you really like to close them with one hand like that, or if you need to, let's say you are working or doing something and your other hand is busy and you need to close your knife with one hand. It's a little tricky and you really have to make sure that you're applying pressure in the right places, but this is one of the easier ones to do that with, right? So that doesn't affect a lot of people. It's a very specific circumstance, but I feel like it's worth noting. So this is great. It does exactly what I want it to do. The button is slightly recessed. It doesn't need a safety. I don't feel like it never went off in my pocket. In fact, I've never had an automatic knife go off in my pocket. They either have safeties or the buttons are recessed, so this is fine. Let's do carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It is not thick. It's about the same length and height up against the PM2 and the Para 3. Yeah, this is a very easy full-size knife to carry. It is extremely friendly in the pocket. Let's weigh it. What do we have for materials here? We have aluminum and an aluminum, to my knowledge, aluminum backspacer, steel pocket clip, and then this is actually a MagnaCut blade, which is nice. So you have very similar materials to what you would expect from ProTech and other, launch series knives. I as much as I love CPM 154, I think the move to MagnaCut for a lot of Kershaw's stuff is a good idea. MagnaCut is an incredible steel, and it is made for pocket knives, and I think Kershaw does a pretty good job with it. I don't think Kershaw's hitting that optimal 63, 64 HRC. Wouldn't surprise me at all if they're hitting it at 62 or 63, something like that. The edge does not fatigue immediately, which would be indicative of a poorly heat-treated blade. I've definitely had some knives where I just a few passes into cardboard and the edge is already losing its sharpness and just immediately going dull. So I've never experienced that with Kershaw, but I don't have HRC testing equipment, so I don't know exactly where they're hitting it, but maybe you do and you can tell me and share with everybody else. It seemed just fine to me. But anyways, let's weigh it. We have aluminum that has not been milled out for weight reduction, but it doesn't need it. I'd be surprised if this even weighed 3.5. I bet it weighs just over 3. So let's find out here. Yeah, 3.1 ounces. That's 0.1 ounces over what I consider to be ultra lightweight. At 3 ounces or anything less, it's just that much more likely for me to forget that it's in my pocket. This is a big enough object that I never forgot. It was just kind of that perfect, like 3.5-inch blade, but it's just over 3 ounces and really, really friendly to carry. Also really friendly in and out of the pocket with that bill and not crazy retention on the clip. So just good stuff. Let's go ahead and measure the blade stock thickness here with my calipers that are buried. This is a pretty, I bet it's no more than 120 thousandths, maybe less, maybe 115. Let's see. Yeah, a little shy of 118 thousandths or so. So definitely on the thinner side. We've weighed it, we've measured it, we've done the blade stock thickness. Oh, we need to do the hardware check, of course. Did I get, probably something got caught on my pocket there. That's not a fault on the aluminum or anything like that. It's just I pulverized something there against the hard coat anodizing. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. It's a very simple construction for an automatic knife. We have a T8 pivot. We have a captive female end of the pivot barrel, or the pivot cap, or whatever you want to call it. And then you have 2 T6 screws right here and 2 T6 screws for the pocket clip, but we've got Chicago ends. So it's just 2 screws. I would prefer that those were T8, like that would have been so much better, but okay, like I can deal with that. And then you also have, mounting positions for the pocket clip on both sides. Automatic knives are a little tricky when you take them apart because to get them back together, you're kind of having to work against tension. And it can be tricky and it can be a little bit dangerous. So tape the blade off if you're going to do that. But it's far from impossible. And at least they made it easy to get into the internals, right? Most of the time, you probably won't need to take it apart. I mean, literally just hot soapy water and compressed air and some good protective lubricant like that. That's really all it'll take. But if you really have to get in there, you can, right? It's far from impossible. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Okay, the rest of this review is pretty straightforward because it's the Iridium. But if you have not heard me talk about the Iridium before, this is a good knife design. They're not reinventing the wheel. This is an in-house design from Kershaw. I wonder how many times I've done that. In Kaiser reviews, how many times I've said Kershaw, and in Kershaw reviews, how many times I've said Kaiser. I bet I've already done it in this video and not even realized it. But it's an in-house design from Kershaw. There's some differences here that are not on the other Iridiums to my knowledge, and that's this sort of stepped, like each one of these, like this angle, and then this is separate from this flat line here. And it's there's so much that it gives the illusion of contouring. It's not actually contoured, but it does kind of feel that way. The end result is that it's very, very nice in hand. So I imagine that's a cheaper way to do it than actually cutting it that way, but you achieve essentially the same results. There is a little bit of a choke up spot. It's more of just a flat place to rest your finger, and it does work. And the jimping back here, thankfully, is functional, so it works. Very simple drop point blade, or I'm going to call it a drop point blade with a big swedge, so a little bit of personality there. Just kind of honestly, just a straightforward, good-looking aesthetic. It's a good-looking American EDC auto. And truthfully, if I was going to EDC an automatic knife, which I typically don't, I typically gravitate towards manual knives, but this is probably one of the best experiences I've had all the way around. And it's basically just because the Iridium is such a good knife to begin with. You can buy the manual version, like the Chinese version, for $50, something like that. It's great, right? There's a bunch of different versions. You can get premium versions that are M390 and carbon fiber or S35EN or whatever, right? But yeah, it's a good knife. So it translates really, really well into an auto. And that's not always the case, but in this case, it definitely is. It's a nice thin edge, nice tip, right? You feel like, you don't really feel like you're carrying much at all. But a 3.5-inch blade, in my opinion, is a pretty substantial blade. You just aren't dealing with like this much body, this much knife. You know, a lot of knives that are 8 inches with a 3.5-inch blade, they tend to lean more of the, you know, the way of the Ritter Hogue, which is it's not an incredibly heavy knife, but it's substantially more knife than this, and they both can accomplish essentially the same thing. I don't love that Kershaw puts all this crap all over it. 7038, Kai USA, Magna Cut. Like, can we just put Magna Cut? You know, like, and then it says Kershaw Auto or Auto Kershaw. Like, okay, I can understand wanting to put it's such a good looking knife. You know, the more billboarding there is, a little bit's okay, but the more that there is, the more it pulls away from the look. I do like the little American flag right here. I think that's kind of cool, but not everybody's going to love that. Pocket clip is just amazing. This is such a simple, like, it's such an easy thing to carry and put in your pocket and get out when you need it. It might be a little bit, depending on the pants you're wearing, it might be a little bit high tension. You can bend this back a little bit, but in my experience, I mean, even sitting down in thick sweatpants, it's probably one of the most difficult ways to put your knife back in your pocket. And even then, it's not bad, right? Overall, really good experience using cutting. I mean, I just did simple stuff. I didn't do any crazy testing or anything. Just like a regular Joe, right? Get it out and cut, use it when I need to. Just very, very friendly as an automatic knife. There's a big kind of intimidation threshold that comes with automatic knives. And, you know, if your first experience is with kind of a cumbersome and kind of a hard firing auto, you know, a lot of people they build up companies like ProTech in their head, which is a great company. They're an amazing company. I love ProTech. I own a ton of them. Sometimes they get a ProTech and they're like, holy moly, you know, and it fires really hard and it just is like, I'm going to go back to my manual fully. You know, some people just immediately are turned off to automatic knives because of that. This will not do that. This is probably the easiest way, especially if you've never, you know, carried or used or even handled an automatic knife. Switchblade is what we call this. That's factually and legally what this is, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But if you've never EDC'd one, this is probably, especially if you're big on buying US-made knives, this is probably one of the best ways to like ease into it because it's such a friendly and easy to use auto, and it's not intimidating. You don't have to. You get it out and you push the button. It's easy to hang on to. It fires, and then it's outside of that, it's just a great EDC design. I like the backspacer. I think it's cool. They didn't make it perfectly flat, and they added the lanyard bar or whatever back here. It carries plenty deep. Hard coat anodizing is a little chalky. This is just, if you're not familiar with this, it's plenty strong. It's aluminum. This will scratch up very easily over time. It just does. It's somewhat scratch resistant, right? But it's going to scratch up over time. It's just how that is. No blade play up, down, left, or right. No lock stick whatsoever. No pivot lash, nice and smooth in here. And a nice click into the closed position. We have perfect centering, absolutely perfect centering. This is a switchblade. Many states have very strict laws against switchblades. You know, some people will try to define this as assisted. It is not. This is a switchblade. So you need to look up your local laws and find out, is it legal to carry, or owning a switchblade is different than being able to legally carry it. And furthermore, you know, some states are like, you can carry a switchblade, but not over a certain length. So you have to check those laws for yourself. I don't know all the different laws. I know that here in Kansas, they don't really care. I can carry an automatic sword if I wanted to, and nobody would, I mean, people would be like, well, what is going on? You know, but I'm not going to get in any legal trouble for it, but you might. So you need to check that out for yourself. Do I recommend this knife? Yes. This is a very, very good auto. The price tag is a little higher than the average launch. So I was really hoping to see this at about $165 or so. It's $180, which is, it might be a little higher for the launch series knives, but it's definitely, as far as truly US made automatic knives go, it is still less expensive than what we typically see. So I don't have a problem with that. I think it's awesome. You can get any USA made knife with a premium blade material under $200 these days. Usually you end up with some form of injection mold plastic or some hollowed out Grivery Benchmade. Sorry, weird cough there. But yeah, it just doesn't feel good. This feels solid and it's still lightweight. It feels like an actual tool. It's just like, this is something I would be proud to carry and feel equipped carrying. And it's another example of like Kershaw just being an awesome company and making knives that people want and that people will actually use. So yeah, this is highly recommendable for people looking for an automatic knife. Obviously, if you don't like automatic knives, don't buy this, but you probably knew that this was an automatic knife before you clicked on the video. So yeah, if you were ever hoping that Kershaw would bring the Iridium to the US end, well, they did it. They just made it automatic. So people who like automatics, I would say definitely don't sleep on this. It's a great, great buy. Awesome EDC knife. I'll link it down in the description, and I'm also going to add this to my most recommended knives playlist. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram, at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.